Hyper sisters and brothers. I am excited that in a moment I'm going to introduce you to author Chris Donaldson. Now, I have to be honest with you, as a podcaster, I can't always read the books of my guests because I would be even broker than I am today, because running a podcast is not cheap and it's not funded for me at the moment. But this time I had to read Chris's book. He reached out and mentioned it when he was talking to me about the podcast. Chris is someone who he's going through some struggles right now, as we all do. However, he wrote an amazing story of what he decided to do when he was a very young man. He grew up in Belfast, Ireland, during what they call the Trouble, the Catholics and the Protestants fighting constantly. And in Belfast, where he lived, it was like an obstacle course. There was so much violence going on in the background all the time as a child. So his dream was to ride his motorcycle to Australia from Belfast. As someone who hadn't traveled, and as a very young man, he didn't have a whole lot of amazing planning going on, it seemed like, for his trip, but he had the commitment in his heart to do it. He just knew that was his destination. So right now I ordered the audiobook version and I'm listening to it. I can't even tell you how much fun his book is. It's called Going the Wrong Way. And like I said, his name is Chris Donaldson. Be here in a second. It says, escaping 1970s Belfast on his moto, I might say this wrong, Guzzi Le Mans, Chris searches for himself and the road to Australia. What could possibly go wrong? And let me tell you about everything you could imagine, between he's leaving Belfast and he has to drive through other places where there is war-torn everything. There were hostages, American hostages in some of the places he'd gone. He's going through Sudan. He was going through Syria. He was going through, I hope I got that right, Syria, many African countries and Arab countries to reach his final destination. And of course, in a story like this, just like when you go through any challenging time, you can't make it out alive unless you've met some great people along the way, because inevitably something will go very, very wrong. This is a journey story rather than just the destination. So really excited to have him. Please don't forget that you have more than 100 episodes in the backlist. They're not all on YouTube, just the last 10 or so episodes are on YouTube. And from here on out, they will remain on YouTube, but also available on Apple, on Spotify, on any place that you're getting your podcasts. And as ever, I really appreciate it when you share episodes, when you review the episode or the podcast, and certainly jump on my email list at lameredith.com for updates on my writing, my storytelling, and my amazing podcast guests that I love to offer you. Thanks for being here, and it is a joy. Let's see if I can hit pause recording. All right, and like I said, I'm very, very, very excited to have author Chris Donaldson here all the way from Belfast. Thank you, Chris, for being here to talk with the audience about your amazing life and what inspired you to write your book more recently.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
It's terrific to have you. And I already shared with the listeners that I'm listening to your audiobook. Great narrator. Was that you? By the way, who narrated your book?
No, it wasn't. It's a nephew. I decided at the age of 64 that I shouldn't really talk as a young man. So I got a younger me to do it. So
he does a great job narrating your book. He really does. But Chris, before we get started with that, tell us a little bit about yourself and what was it that sparked you a couple years ago to publish this book? Much of it that happened at such a young age, like barely drinking age of 21.
That's right. Yes. Well, when I was 21, I decided to ride my motorbike around the world through driving east from the UK, from Belfast, through Europe, through Asia, and to Australia. And I never got there because it was 1979. Just at the November 79, the Iranians took over the American embassy in
Yes.
Tehran. If you're old enough to
Yes. Oh,
remember
I
back.
am. I remember it well.
So that stopped my road east, and I ended up going everywhere else. Practically, then Australia. I ended up going down to South Africa through the Middle East and Africa. I took a yacht race, joined a yacht race back to Europe. Went over to Los Angeles, around Canada, up to Canada, and then down through states, Central America, down to South America, and I ended up in Argentina. So it's a bit of an Irish joke. You start off, try to go to Australia, and you end up in Argentina.
That's okay. That's kind of
So
how all of life is. You have a plan and life gets right in the way and you just
that's
have to
right.
pivot.
So that's why the book's called Going the Wrong Way, because there's quite a few instances I went the wrong way, and quite a few times in life I've gone the wrong way as well. I think it's a bit of a motto of mine over the years, and unintentionally.
It happens. It happens to all of us sometimes. And I traveled when I was young, but for very different reasons than you did. I didn't have, well, anyway, but I will say that some of your book, I mean, being arrested, being basically taken advantage of for money every which way, having your motorcycle break down again and again and again. You can't get anywhere in life without the help of strangers. It's true.
No,
You just
that's
can't.
true.
And I love that you collected those stories, because it's, as much as it is fun to laugh at a younger man, it's also amazing and inspiring to hear of the strangers, some who had bad intentions, most who did not.
Yeah. Well, I wrote a journal at the time. I kept a good journal, and when I got back home, I started writing a book, and I wrote a couple of manuscripts. But then another guy had written a book about going riding around the world on a motorbike, and he was a journalist. He was a middle-aged journalist. He'd been very successful. He'd actually ridden around the world. So I sort of gave up. I thought, well, nobody would want to hear my story,
Oh,
and I put it in a drawer for 40 years.
oh my
Um,
goodness.
so that's why it's in the long term, it's been great, because it's given me much more of an eye on what was going on in my life at that stage. When I was 22, I didn't really know what had gone on,
Sure.
but being able to look back on it with an older viewpoint, I think I've been able to write a much better book from it, much better story.
Exactly.
Viewing a young man's escapades from an older, more experienced sort of eyesight,
Yes.
or viewpoint.
I hope your parents ever forgave you for all the anxiety they went through.
Well, I'm a parent myself, and be horrified if my children decided to do something like that.
Oh my goodness, because as you're going on this journey, one of my daughters right now is overseas for a few months, but I just think, oh, I don't think I would have been able to sleep. And back when you went on your journey, that wasn't like there was iPhones, there wasn't an internet or Facebook to track you. It was just every some months you might be able to call,
That
so
was pretty much it. It was, not only was it very hard to call back, but it was very expensive. I mean, it cost me about £5 and to ring from Egypt for 5 minutes, and that would be like about £50, about $50 now for 5 minutes. So
right.
now you can phone from anywhere for practically nothing.
I know.
I mean, what happened? Fast forwarding 43 years after I published the book, one of my friends said to me, "Well, you never actually got to Australia. Why don't we try and get to Australia now? See if we can redo the trip you didn't finish." So last year we decided to do it in 2 week sections, because I'm still working and I've still got a family. So we'd go for 2 weeks and go back to work, and 2 months later go back out, pick up the bike, and motor on. And ironically, I still have the same motorcycle. It's a Moto Guzzi's 45-year-old motorbike.
Oh my
And
goodness.
it's had a very hard paper round, as we would say here. It's had a very hard life. It's been rebuilt a couple of times, but it's still going. So it has actually reached Australia now. Over the
Oh,
last year, I drove to Athens, then to Israel, then through Turkey and Iran to Dubai, and then Pakistan and India and Nepal, and finally to Australia. So I have actually finally completed the journey 43 years later.
I love that. And was it on motorcycle, all of it?
It's on the same motorcycle that
Oh
I
my
started
goodness.
off with 43 years ago. I never sold the bike. I kept it in the garage and rebuilt it and took it with me. So the backers always love to say it was an unsuitable bike at the time that they took it, but it's still going strong.
I love it. I hope you got some video footage of some of this last year, because it sounds like a perfect, at the very least, documentary, if not a feature film. That is so beautiful that you had this dream, and yet, it didn't turn out. Okay, that happens. But all these years later, you didn't give up, just like on the book.
Yeah, well, you're talking about perseverance. I suppose 43 years is a reasonable length of time to persevere for something, isn't it?
It's amazing. It is such a fortunate thing that you did not publish that book. And the truth is, usually what people tell you when you're publishing a book today is, if somebody else wrote a book similar that's popular, that might be the perfect time to publish a book.
Of course, yeah,
because it's in your voice and it's in your story. It'll never be the same. Movies are different. If there's a similar movie and you have one that's in the queue, it may kill your movie idea. But with books, it's different. But it worked out to everyone's advantage that you finished the story before you finished the book.
Yeah. Well, the reason I wrote the book too is I've been in business for the last 40 years. And about, 10 years ago, I suppose, I started having trouble after the property crash. I was in property business.
Sure.
Ended up self-litigating against the banks. You had the same problems in the States with the banks. Took everybody's houses and took everybody's businesses. So they were up to a lot of skullduggery, not to use any bad language. So I was able to self-litigate and get all my businesses back again.
Good.
And my wife and a few people said, well, why don't you should write a book about it, because it's quite difficult, obviously, to deal with these Goliaths of companies, to try and litigate against them and fight, even though they're legally wrong. You're fighting the courts.
Right.
The courts
they have
are
money.
they have the money, and if money counts rather than what's just and what's right. So luckily, I think luck and perseverance got me through and got my businesses back again. So somebody said, you should write a book about that. And I thought, well, actually, if I'm going to write a book, I've got a better story to start with, which would hone my writing skills a little bit better.
Yes. Oh, I think, you're doing a great job.
Yeah, it's gone very well. I mean, it's getting some great reviews. It's nearly 1,000 sort of 4 or 5 star reviews now. So
that's huge. That's
huge
really huge. Your book was just published 2 years ago. That's kind of unheard of.
It really is. It's from all various other travel books. It's getting the best reviews that I've seen so far. So it's struck a point, and it's nice too, because I was always a bit of at the back of the class in my English class. I was never a literary scholar by any means. So it's quite shocking in a way that I've been able to write a bestseller on Amazon without those.
I think that's really
skills. So I mean, if I can write a book, anybody can.
Well, I think, I'm glad you kept it up, and that's true. Everyone has a story in them. And I think so often people shut themselves down and say, someone else has told this story. I couldn't do it. I don't have the right degree or the right whatever. That's not true. Look at you. You kept it up. You have, of course, you do have an amazing story, but we would have never heard it had you not been persistent. So I'm really, really glad you were able to finish that. And tell us about getting the audiobook, because I'm really enjoying it. It feels like I'm experiencing the trip, because I have someone with definitely a Belfast accent, narrating the book. So do tell the audience about how you got the book narrated, because that's unique.
Yeah. Well, as it says, my nephew I didn't want to, there's various bits and pieces I got up to as a young 21-year-old, which I didn't think was very wise talking about as a 64-year-old man. So I think it sounds better from a 21-year-old voice.
Right.
So hopefully that's come through in the book, on the audio.
Definitely. You hear someone headstrong and determined in the narration. I am enjoying it very much. So well done for you. Can you hear me still pretty well?
I don't know.
Okay. Wonderful.
Sorry.
It's all right. It's absolutely all right. So what would you say to someone who's considering writing their own journey, such as your own? What are some great, maybe a tip that you have for them if they're,
for writing a book.
yep,
Do as much research and background learning, I suppose. The great thing about the internet is you can find various courses of reading and writing, different types of book and self-publishing. It's all, information is all there. So I did go back to school a bit and learned how to, how to write a novel, how to write a book, how to write a memoir, what the difference, how to put sentences together in a way that people are interested in.
right.
Especially now, because it seems strange. It seems strange to me at the time to learn that people read differently than they used to read.
Correct.
Kids especially, are so short, such a short attention span with the internet. It used to be, my day, if you wanted to find something out, you'd have to go to the library. You could spend all day trying to find out something. Whereas now you get on Google and it's there for 2 minutes, 2 seconds. And the same with apps, with everything they do. Everybody wants instant knowledge, instant action, instant pleasure, whatever they're doing in a game or whatever it is. So you have to be much more to the point than you used to be. If you read an old Charles Dickens book or something, they're very flamboyant, they're very descriptive, but they go on, they take forever, take a page to make a point.
Right.
Whereas people want it much more sappy now and much more to the point. So, and different books, of course, every book is different, every type of book. So, but that's what I find with mine. Certainly, it was good to get as much background information as you could, what your readers would want.
I love it. You're so right about the short attention span. So that means that literally now, if an author's writing a book, they need to capture the person's attention within that first paragraph.
Totally.
It used to be the first 10 pages. Now it's like, nope, you might have a page of their interest, and then they'll keep scrolling to find a book that captures their interest. So it's a different way of writing to get someone's short attention span and keep it moving forward. And there's a lot of description and things that people no longer want. And so I think it's fabulous that you went ahead and got, learned about it and got some information, whether it's a class, an online class, a writing group, whatever. Very smart. Because I think one thing I've had a lot of people do is tell me, when you have friends or people who want to write, they'll hand you a couple hundred pages and are like, hey, would you mind reading this? See what you think. And I'm like, well, yeah, I would actually. And yes, I would, because I don't honestly have I do work, but also it's just not the process, writing is great, but also diving in and getting a peer group and getting instruction is brilliant.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's self-publishing. Obviously, you're doing everything yourself. You're writing it, you're formatting it, or getting somebody to do it for you, getting it edited, getting it published, uploading it onto Amazon. You've got to go through all the processes. And as you were saying earlier, marketing is the most important part, because getting it onto Amazon is one thing, you're getting it onto the market, but you got to get it out there, get the name out there. There's so many millions of books out there. So much more competition than there used to be as well,
Yes, but then you have greater access to your audience now too.
Yeah.
What was which part of your journey as a young man, which was the most stressful part? Like which country, and what was like when you were writing it, it was like, wow. And why?
Probably the African part, the bit you've just read around about going through Sudan.
Okay.
Would have been the most difficult part, because it was going back to basics, going back practically the Stone Age in a way. I was out crossing the desert on a road bike, going through the sand. It took about a week to cross a few hundred miles of desert. So it's slow going, and then through the bush, which really was on my own. There wasn't another European for miles around. Anything went wrong, I had to sort it out myself. Ran out of petrol. There's no transport. There was a war going on in Uganda, or it just finished. Idi Amin had just left, and they were between civil wars. It was like half time between their civil wars. So that was a bit stressful, and the fact that I was going the wrong way. I spent about 6 years planning my trip to Australia. I knew all the countries, all the towns, practically the hotels I was going to stay in. But going down through Africa, at one stage I actually drove off the edge of my map before I could get another map for the bit after Sudan. So I really literally didn't know what country was going to turn up next, which was a good thing in a way, because otherwise I would have probably turned around and gone back again. But
Yes.
it helped make the journey in such a way that I was there for the travel rather than the destination, because I didn't really know where I was going. I was just enjoying the travel and during the journey, rather than what most people travel. They travel for one reason, that's to get somewhere.
Right.
Whereas my journey was quite different, because I was actually just traveling for the sake of the travel.
I like that. I like that a lot. There's a lot to unpack in that, because that's a lot like life, you know. And if you
Yeah.
can learn to be content in the journey rather than so hyper focused on an outcome or the destination, I feel like people are so much better off that way. And
Yeah.
that trip through Sudan and the train trips, the arrest, as someone who has been arrested in a foreign country, I still am recovering from that. And it was so many years ago.
I'm sure there's a good story there.
It's scary. It is scary when I mean, it's a beautiful gift to be able to travel out of one's own country, but you're playing in the play box of someone who didn't invite you. And so
Yeah.
you don't even know all the rules. Really, even if you read about them online, you don't really know all the rules, and you get there. And when I'm listening to your book, I think, well, that's one way to wash all idealism out of a young
Yes.
person, is to let them travel.
But one of the nice things about traveling these countries is the people you meet are so nice. I mean,
Yes.
it's usually the government organizations that would give you the hassle.
Right.
I mean, just last year I went through, actually 6 months ago, I went through Iran, and the people there were some of the most friendly I've met anywhere in my travels.
Oh,
Whereas we're told by our media that, well, it's a really dangerous place, you should never go there, it's terrible people, or blah blah blah. But actually, when you get there, it's as nice as anybody you've ever met.
wonderful.
It's the government and the organizations that are controlling the place that are
Sure.
the bad guys.
Absolutely. I think, wow, I can't imagine. And you got to go to Dubai and then finally Australia. Which was your favorite part when you finally made it there decades later than you meant to? What was your favorite part of being in Australia?
Well, I haven't actually got to Australia there. I got the bike shipped off. I rode to Nepal
Okay.
and then left the bike there, got it shipped to Brisbane to some friends who live there. So I'm flying out at the end of this month to pick it up and actually finish the journey.
Happened? Oh my goodness. Sorry, I misunderstood you. Can you please, when you get a chance, take a selfie and send it to me so that when this episode drops, that I can put that in the show notes?
I certainly will. I mean, I'm hoping to get through the States as well. Once I get to Australia to finish the journey, could finish the round trip and go through the States as well. So you never know, maybe call in and see you sometime.
Say hello. I went to Australia by myself in 2015. Didn't know as much as I should have about Australia. I got thrown off a bus late at night one night because I couldn't understand the bus driver. They speak a very different kind of English than maybe some other people do, but I loved it. I met such nice people, have friends there now. I don't know. I think solo travel is one of the best things in the world for people who are committed to it, because it really does test your mettle.
Yeah, it does. It does. No, I'm hoping to have a lot of friends there. I'm looking forward to it. Although it is, as we're talking about a journey in life, sometimes if you're out on a journey, that you're enjoying the journey, when you get to the destination, it can be a bit of a disappointment, because although you're wanting to get there, it doesn't mean the journey's over.
Right.
So
I like that.
It's like the death of the journey is the destination. So there's different times I've arrived at the place I've set off to, and it's actually been a disappointment tinged with the satisfaction of getting there. There's a disappointment that the journey's over too.
Right. Oh, I think absolutely. Now, what is then next on your writing agenda?
Well, as I say, I started off cutting my teeth on the journey of the motorbike trip. So I hope to document the bank story, which is going to be a very different story than being a 21 mad biker.
Okay.
So it's going to be a lot more difficult to make it as an enjoyable read, as well as just um, a diarized entry of what happened along my work with the program, what I went through, which is a little bit like a journey. A lot of travel journeys, travel books I've read are very much updated diary or updated journal of what they've done at different day to day, which I think is a bit disappointing. You need to make a bit of a story out of it as well. It has to be. You want to know what happened when you got to places. Not we've all seen pictures of places. We've all seen pictures of Iran, pictures of India, but it's the stories of what happened to you when you were there that are the interesting part, I think.
Yes, and
So
how it shaped you, how it shaped your life. Absolutely.
yeah.
Well, you're a
So
fabulous storyteller.
the trick, the difficulty in this story is going to be making courtroom appearances and legal arguments interesting and fun and hard and difficult, and you give them a depth of feeling rather than just an intellectual how to beat the banks.
Sure. Sure. Absolutely. Well, I'm excited to read and hear about how Australia actually was for you. I
Good.
hope you enjoy it. My favorite place, I didn't get, Australia is so huge. Of course, I only got to go to parts of it, but I loved Melbourne, loved it so much. And I bet you're going to have a terrific journey.
Yes, there's a bit of a party plan just outside Melbourne. That's going to be my end destination.
Oh,
I'm going to ride
nice.
from Brisbane down to Melbourne. But as you say, it's a huge country. I've got friends in Perth as well, and I was thinking it'd be nice to nip over there. And it's a 4-hour plane ride or 2,000 miles drive with
Yes.
really nothing in between apart from desert. So I
Oh,
guess it's going from New York to San Francisco without anything in between but desert.
all right.
So
Well, what adventure you have still ahead of you. And I think that's going to be so much fun. So much fun. I met some of the people that I am closest to are the ones that I met, let's say, on a train that I still have regular contact
yeah.
with, and or a bus, or on the journey. I just love collecting those treasures of friendships. And I know that this will continue in your life as well. Where can listeners connect with you and find more out about your writing and your journey?
Okay, well, I'm on my website's Chris Donaldson World,
Okay.
chrisdonaldson.world, which has got details about me. But the book's on Amazon. Probably the best places to get it on Amazon. It's called Going the Wrong Way by Chris Donaldson.
Such a great name of a book.
Yeah, well, it's a line of was it Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. When I first sort of heard the line as the guy shouting, "You're going the wrong way," as it go down the wrong side of the road. So it's a bit like that. It's a bit of a slow motion train crash.
I think it is so much fun. Stressful in spots, like I said earlier, but always a laugh. So I'm really glad to meet you. Evidence that you are still alive, because there were many opportunities where the opposite could be true.
That's true.
Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you very much for having me.